going to kick this off. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've had a really great Paris Fintech Forum so far. Closing off, of course, with the most important topic, as you can imagine. My name is Nkiruka. I work as part of SWIFT, as part of the Global Innovation Team. Today I have a lovely set of panelists here, and initially we're going to do actually roll call to see if there's any brave men who would like to join the discussion right here. We have a traveling microphone as well, so do feel free to join us if you so wish to. We want to make this an inclusive discussion. Some of you might have joined the Women in Finance lunch today and spoke about the latest WEF report that was launched, and to say that to achieve gender parity, we still have 257 years in front of us. Clearly, that is way too long, because none of us will be around. So we want to discuss today, very specifically, what are some of the practical things that we can do as part of our organizations in order to help make that a little bit shorter, but also, more importantly, how does gender diversity vary across different regions, and what can we maybe learn from different cultures in order to promote gender diversity? So I'll hand it over to April first to give an introduction of herself.
So thank you. I am the chair of Wealth Tech for Paris Fintech Forum, and also at that lunch today I heard some people speaking out that we should not participate on panels that are largely or all populated by men, but of course my panels were populated by men, as you might imagine, in wealth management, so that's always still a rub. I started my business over 10 years ago. I work in wealth management marketing. We're sort of at the intersection of wealth, next gen, and technology, helping brands to become more visible and attract clients of all generations and all genders and all diverse backgrounds. So,
hi.
It's in the U.S., of course.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Carmen Vicelich, and I have two businesses centered around data and technology. So there was a lot of talk about tech entrepreneurs being and female ones being rare, and that's certainly the case in most places that I go. So one business is Data Insight that helps large corporates, mostly banks, that have lots of data and don't know what to do with it. And the second one is Valocity Global, and we were here as a fintech finalist. And Valocity helps lenders streamline the mortgage and valuation process so they can say yes when you're getting a home. And outside of that, importantly, I am also mother of four. And so for me, diversity and gender diversity is very much how you balance those two things. So, and I live in New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Denise Johansson from Finland. I'm a co-founder of a fintech company. We provide payment processing for banks and financial institutions. I started the journey in fintech 15 years ago, then on SWIFT side of the payments, and I have seen like it have evolved, being a female within the payment industry, within the banking industry. Yeah, I'm mother of two, one boy, one girl, so I do agree that inclusion and diversity, it's the essence of evolving.
Oh, I didn't realize that we are pretty much from everywhere across the world, which is actually just a diversity by itself. I've lived in 4 different countries, and for me, you know, the power of women in the US was a teaching lesson coming from friends that I will never forget at a very young age. I'm a mom of 2. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Société Générale, and I'm also the Executive Chairman of a fintech called Trezor.
Great. So when we think a little bit more about the numbers, we're looking at finance specifically. There's some numbers released by HBR that showed that still, if you look at private equity and VC, only 10% or less is actually represented by senior women leaders. When you look at hedge funds, that number actually goes down to under 5%. A question to the panelists: why are those numbers still so low? What seems to be the issue? Because every year we come on to the same exact numbers and the questions, and now it seems that actually that move towards gender parity is becoming, in fact, even more slowed down. So why is it that we're moving backwards instead of forwards?
So I just would like to answer the question about why I think women in financial services, why I think the number is low, and particularly fintech and private equity and hedge funds, generally high net worth, right? Why aren't women entering that space? I think that for many women, and I'm just going to sort of make a generalization here, particularly in my age bracket, I think people think that it's all about math or it's all about numbers, and in general, right, women's are people. And I think that we've made such a shift in our society from being less in the left-brain quantitative sort of thinking in financial services to more in the right-brained relationship in terms of community. So I think, I expect that to sort of shift, but I think in the past, people generally thought of financial services as being quantitative numbers jobs, and if you didn't gravitate to math, if you were more of a people person, you really didn't enter financial services. And I think probably the same for technology, generally thought of as more coding or less with people. And so to me, it's sort of no surprise that fintech, to answer your question more specifically about private equity and hedge funds, I think that largely it's men who've risen to the top and they're controlling the money. And so in many organizations, you might find women, but the women are generally in two different areas. One is marketing and the other one is human resources. They're just naturally more community builders, I think.
Totally agree with that. I think there's a couple of things that are more cultural and systemic, even outside of fintech. One of them is, and I think Ariana Huffington has sort of documented that, certainly as a manager managing people, it's really interesting when you talk to your guys and you do their review, they're all like, I'm so wonderful, I should have more money and I'm so fantastic. And when you talk to your ladies, they're always like, well, oh, how am I going? And I think it's a little bit of a confidence thing that as women, we know that family is so important. We know we're going to have babies probably, and we hold back a little bit thinking, well, actually, how am I going to balance those things and do them both? So I think it's a little bit of a confidence thing of actually, I would certainly as a manager of two businesses, I would always rather hire a really capable lady and have her work part-time and still manage her family than a full-time guy who's not as good. So I think we have to put ourselves out there and go actually a little bit more, put ourselves out there for these roles. I think right at the other side of that, we also have to be careful that our emphasis on this problem doesn't create another problem, because how can we change this with a ladies' lunch with only ladies? We're not going to change it with the ladies there. The ladies all agree. So, so I guess, no offense to who organized the ladies' lunch, it was wonderful. But we need both parties. We need to recognize actually it's both sides. So like, we have International Women's Day, and on International Women's Day, I go thank you to my incredible husband who lets me jet around the world and build my business and follow my dreams. And so it's recognizing we have to change the paradigms of our expectations, and that's a major shift. If we change the paradigms that it's just about equality, it's not about women or men, it's just about equality, then I think we change the conversation. Because I was at a global event and they said, no woman has ever won this. Last year we had no woman, so we're so excited. We have an announcement tonight. You can win the Entrepreneur of the Year for woman. And I thought, and everyone's clapping, and I'm like, oh my God, does that mean I don't enter the main event because I'm going to enter the woman's one? That's demeaning. So I think it's, a couple of things that we have to think about, fundamental big paradigm shifts.
I totally agree. It's about background, looking back, and it's culture. So nothing will happen too fast. I was raising money for my company last year. I met 97 VCs. I met 5 women-led conversations out of that. So yeah, the men still has the power, they have the money. But we need to, I totally agree that it needs to be inclusion. So just trying to only empower women won't help us there, because we need the help of the men. So everyone, even listening in this room today, I think is a supporter of equality, that there need to be a shift happening. And those men, we need to raise them, and together with them, trying to find more equal space within the business.
Yeah, I definitely think men at the top with little incentives, to leave the seat. I mean, why should they, it's a bit difficult. You look at the French top 40 company, and there is only one woman, which is a CEO of largest company. Like again, for me, US have taught me everything about gender equality coming from a French background. But more profoundly, the evolution of policies to facilitate women re-entering the workforce, so women returner to work, because as you mentioned, when you start a family, it could be quite intensive. How do you balance your time? I'm sure as moms, we always have this challenge. And my husband is a lead LBO in an American bank, and so he's clearly not the one taking care of the children, and that's challenging. How do you balance that? So we often say that behind a man there is a woman, behind the woman there is actually a network of women and men which are there to cope with anything that could be possible, from picking up the children, being the nanny, even being at this event, which is a 3 full-day event, someone need to be there to watch them, and it can, children are not packaged. And just to share my personal experience, one of the most horrifying thing that I had to face recently in my career was moving from the UK, where I had a paid maternity leave, to come in France, so relocate back to my country. Taking a position pregnant, I faced policies that give me unpaid leave, where I was one of the top executives of a huge UK bank with almost 1 year of paid maternity leave. So what was the incentive for me to exactly take this job, which was twice bigger or 3 times bigger than the one I had, with an unpaid maternity leave, and expose myself to that? And I think it's a bit the same thing for entrepreneurs or, corporate life is what is the incentive when we know your path will be harder, the things will be more difficult, and etc. So I do think systemically we need to fight for these policies to be there. And it's also linked to the fact that, as I was mentioning, women entering the workforce is not so old. Huh?
So, we talk quite a bit here about policy and the impact of culture. And to help us, I think, center that discussion a little bit more, it'd be interesting to understand how maybe from different geographies or cultures we can learn things. So I've had some interesting conversations about exactly this topic over the last couple of days. And actually a gentleman told me that in Slovakia you get 26 months of maternity leave and from the government, which is absolutely incredible if you think about what that does for every individual woman. Same with, I was speaking to CEO of Lex, a startup in the US, and he said, yeah, we have unlimited paid maternity leave, because if we're going to incentivize women to work these crazy hour of jobs, we need to also incentivize them to have a reason why they actually want to take those jobs. So, I mean, you're coming from so many different regions. What are the kind of experiences or policies that you've seen, or also culture where you think, hey, at a global level, we could implement these that could really help fuel that difference?
I can start here because I think Finland is especially good in this. So we have 9 months of paid leave, but only 3 months are dedicated to the mom. So this means that 6 months can be divided for the parents. And that, I think, is the key. So it's not enforced me as a mom to stay at home 9 months to utilize that, but we can actually divide it. And being an employer as well, we have more men than women at the workplace, but we have all the time someone is at paternity leave. So the men are actually stepping up and they want to take part of the first year of their children's life. And we encounter it because that means that they also support their women at home, even though they're not working for me. They are women out and having a career and can continue with that. So taking shared responsibility, I wouldn't like to see that having a child is a burden or is something that makes you step behind in your career, because you are still making that one.
I think, in the U.S. there are a lot of different companies with different policies, but there is no government legislated anything. So usually in the U.S. it's less than what I've found in other countries, particularly Canada, where mat leave can be very long. And then you have the idea of entrepreneur. You know, I started my business and all of the benefits, health benefits for myself, health benefits for my children, all of those things are not provided by the government. Very expensive to have all of those types of benefits. And in one case, I said to someone, you know, it's great to be an entrepreneur because you have unlimited vacation days, right? But guess what? All unpaid. You have unlimited maternity leave. Guess what? Unpaid. You know, just about all of the time you take off is really, anyone?
Unpaid.
Unpaid. So that is really, does not encourage in the U.S. particularly entrepreneurship at all. I didn't mention my kids. I know everybody did, but I do want to mention my kids. So I'm the mother of 2 sons. But in one particular, right, but for one particular reason, because I think it's really important. As a mother of 2 millennials of this new generation, I feel like, particularly we were talking about all this, like, let's change men's attitudes. I don't think that I'm going to be able to change men's attitudes. However, I have a lot of confidence in this new generation, my own children's generation, and then the generations that come after them, to have more of a gender equal, more of a acceptance of all types of diversity, because they're just not raised in that generation. I think very generational.
I think maybe on some policies I've seen working, one of them found actually working, which I didn't believe, was shared jobs. So in the UK, we had a couple of people that were executive directors, and they were working 3 days a week, so like Monday to Wednesday, and the other one was working Wednesday to Friday, and there was a mechanism by which you will pay only one FTE, but you will get the benefits of a joint day. And actually, this type of, and it was interesting because what we tend to see for the most advanced role model is they were moving together from companies to companies. So it became really a joint team, a single person about how they were working. I think that's something, you know, is it possible even in the workplace? Again, I go back to my experience, you know, in the UK, you are allowed to come back to work when you're pregnant 8 days during your pregnancy, which are paid day. In France, it's forbidden, you know, for me. So, you know, why cannot come? Or there is mandatory things. I should have precised that Société changed their policy and no maternity leave is paid, even from, because it was a bank, it's a bank system that makes that if you are coming and you're pregnant in the first 9 months, for every bank it's the same, which I think is preventing mobility, you're unpaid. And Société changed this policy this year. I don't think it's because of me, but maybe I can hope it was because of me. At least it had an impact on the CEO for sure.
Innovation.
Innovation was at the heart. But, you know, I think simple things, really considering what is the life of a woman, returns to today's work, you know, sharing jobs, you know, also implementing return to work, which is phased. So, for example, when you are, you know, for either you're sick or you're pregnant, you know, being able to come back at the beginning 1 day for a month, 2 days, 3 days, you know, this type of flexibility in policy, I think, is really encouraging women to not drop out of the system, because it's a bit like what you were mentioning. Sometimes it's just about confidence, balance, sometimes money as well.
Yeah, I guess in New Zealand we're a little bit well recognised with our Prime Minister recently having had a baby and bringing the baby along to several events and to Parliament. And I guess, so we've only got 12 weeks paid maternity, so I think you definitely win there in Finland, and you were right to start. We're catching up. But most of the policies are around flexible working, so actually being able to work from home for ourselves when somebody has a baby. I'm like, come back when you're ready, how you want, when you want, and you know, very much we actually encourage them to bring the babies to work. We also encourage people to bring their dogs to work, which sometimes clashes when the accountant had her baby lying on the floor and someone's got a puppy and the next thing he's giving the baby a big lick. But you know, it actually really builds the culture around flexibility to go, actually, we recognise that we all come to work, but we're all people. And so how do we work together as people and recognise that? And that's, you know, is about policy, about flexibility going, you know, we give you autonomy as long as you get the job done. You can do it on the hours that you want and how and when you want. And that, I think, is an enabler.
So policy, governmental structures, organizational structures, they all matter very much in order to help bring that impact forward. You mentioned something around, men will not change, right, from your point of view. But ultimately, it's all now a responsibility to continue that conversation and ensure, we drive that forward. So I'd like to understand a little bit more as to how can we help elevate that conversation, and especially having so many lovely men here in the room as well, as to what can we do together, because I think to the point, a lot of times we do tend to have our women networking groups, and that's really important to build sisterhood, confidence, and all sorts of networking opportunities. However, as you said and pointed out, if we don't have that inclusive viewpoint, and that not only around gender but everything, then we're missing a piece of the pie. So how can we do that better, and what are some of the things that we can all take away?
So I was just going to say that obviously I think inclusion and conversation really help, but I guess I'm feeling a little bit pessimistic about real change when I see numbers like we were told today, 250 years for pay equality, for, equality in jobs, for all of these different things. So I can feel optimistic about small changes that people can make in small organizations, and all of that can lead to larger changes. So I guess that's what I would say, is whatever people, individuals can do themselves to rise and raise up people within your own organizations. What I meant about change is that change is hard, particularly for generations. I mean, the average age, of a senior executive at an organization is a different generation person with a different point of view. We recently had in the U.S., I don't know if anybody heard this story about Ken Fisher. Anyone? So he's about a $6 billion advisory firm and had a lot of policies really anti-women, came to conferences, spoke out against women negatively, and finally went to one conference where he was called out for doing it, but he'd done this for 30 years, and he was shocked. And the reason he was called out was because there were younger people, millennials, who really didn't want to listen to that anymore. But being in our generation, in my generation, no one had ever really called him out. So there was a certain amount of just, I'll say, tolerance, or even, so we're just, just being used to hearing this and being, I don't know if it's afraid to call it out, but just, just sort of dismissing it. So I feel like younger generations and the conversation will really call it out so that more people can see things, and that will really have people reflect on it. This particular guy, if you want to look up the story, said that he'd been doing this. He was talking about how the stock market was like a part of men's genitalia, and it went up and it went down. And, he drew a picture of it on a board. And he'd been doing that for 30 years. He thought that that was a really clever way of showing the stock market. And till these two, a woman and a man, they just couldn't believe it. And it was in a meeting with Chatham House Rules, and they just took to Twitter and, let go on this guy. And it's only through that, that's what makes me say it's about newer generations and newer people who don't have tolerance for those things.
Crikey.
Can anybody top that story?
Sorry. Oh, wow. I don't have that story. But I think it's about recognizing in some areas we're making great progress, and great to see sort of Goldman Sachs saying they're not going to support a business to list if there's no females on the directorship. I think it was Goldman Sachs. And I think, that's great. In other areas, you can be a little bit pessimistic. That when I found this room, I'm like, oh my God, it's the smallest room of the entire conference, and we're all about the future of women in fintech. I'm a little bit worried. So no offense. No offense to the organizers. But why aren't we on stage one? Where's Laurent? He could actually be doing this panel, and I'm not picking on that, but actually it's SASTA that they say at SASTA that, SASTA is a software as a service conference in San Francisco, and they've got the problem. There's no woman in tech and no women come to this. And what did they do? They gave free tickets to women. And guess what? Every year over the last 4 years, there's more women. There's still a queue for the guys' toilets a mile long after each session, and you're like, wow, no queue for the ladies. First time ever, tech conference. But they actually did something about it. And so if they really feel that next year we want to be on stage one, we want the big hitters, and maybe we won't call it the difference in gender diversity and evolution. We'll call it how to win in business. How to win in business is to have diverse thinking. If you want to be a digital bank, you need to have people that are digital. If you want to, so it's actually on topic and on theme, and it's not just, because even our topic is not going to make us progress. I have lots of lessons like your story, because I've launched my business in India. That is really fun, where, I go with my 60-year-old colleague, and no matter which side of the car I get in, the driver opens his door and says, here you go, sir, and I think he thinks I'm either the girlfriend or the PA, or and I think the worst was I had lunch in a restaurant with the High Commissioner, all men, and the guy giving out the menu looked at me and just carried on, gave the menu to everybody else, and I didn't even get a menu. I guess I'm taking the privileges that we have as entrepreneurial women, being able to travel around the world, not for granted. I'm meeting someone from Saudi Arabia for business, and I'm meeting them in Dubai. My husband doesn't want me to go and to Saudi yet, and just last year they were only allowed to drive. So I think we've got to recognize we're on a journey, and how can we push our way through and go, actually that's not okay, and drive the change, because we've got a long way to go.
I was listening to the panel before this, and I can say that there were like 1/3 of people here listening at that panel, only men. So we have improvement in listeners at least. Yeah. Thinking about the 257 years before we have equality, I want to see it as the global warming. So I think it will speed up because of the generation shiftings. The generations before us, they have had to struggle with everything, voting rights, right for education, and so on. And when we have those things in place, as we have now, women actually have a voice, and the new generations, the millennials and those that come after them, it's a no-brainer for them. Like, we need to tell them about how it was 50, 70 years ago, how their grandma lived, and they are like, what? How come? So I think when they start taking roles in the industry, we see the shifting, and I do believe that our generation will see a shift happening.
We're setting examples.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And role models, that is education, role models, it's coming from there. It's not about men changing, because it's not their fault. It's about lifting up the women and have common goals with everyone.
Thanks. I'm very optimistic. I mean, first, I think I'm just an example of it. So, but I think, more profoundly, we talked about, shift in generation, but also I think to some extent it's inevitable, because what we see, and obviously leading innovation and digital, you can see that the companies that are going to win it are the ones that are offering the best customer experience, the best product design possible. And to do that, you need to be diverse. And I remember about 4 or 5 years ago when I was leading one of the innovation team, and there was a person asking me, did you realize your team is so diverse? Because there was people coming from everywhere in the world, and it was not by design, it was not intentional. It just happened that it was the best people from designer teams, and it was very rare skills, and they were just coming to be the best to do that. But if you want to be competitive in the world of tomorrow in financial services, you have to provide the best customer experience possible, and these are not going to come from non-diverse team. And so I think the factor is not far. I mean, like we can see in fintechs, it's already there. And we can see that fintechs want to attract very diverse talent. So it's already a reality. Plus you combine to that the fact that, Davos was saying low growth rate and etc. But the opportunity for higher growth is women returning to work. women taking the power. 1 trillion in the economy if women go at work. I mean, I don't really see how this is not going to happen. For me, it's just a matter of a very short period of time, but we have to stay mobilized, to mobilize the men, as you mentioned, to mobilize the investment, and to leave nothing on the road, because honestly, as I mentioned, why should they leave their job?
I just want to add one thing to that also, because when I hear that conversation, and that's great, and it's so true. So I run a marketing firm, and I have a lot of firms come to me that want to do segmented marketing, and they think that they can do a marketing program toward women, as if all women would be one group. So I just want to point that out, because I'm continually telling people also, just even this panel, somebody pointed out how diverse we are, different racial backgrounds, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, different wants, different needs. So I think it's all that lumping, even for women and for men, instead of thinking people as people and as individuals. And I think that's what FinTech has the promise to be able to do, is to bring customized and personalized, right, depending on who you are, what you like, and not because you're a certain gender or anything else. So I'd like to try to get away from even the lumping of gender too.
Yeah, and it's clear that, you know, a lot of it will be organic, and sometimes we just need to have time in order to let the organic, you know, ability for that to transform. Part of it also is mobilization, as you pointed out. And what I like really on this panel is also one that is about speak your demands, because you are right. If next year we're having the same conference, it will be stage one.
I might not be invited back.
But I think those demands are really important, right? And it's like, again, women verbalizing more of those demands, same when it comes to maternity leave, or it comes to, for example, a pay increase. Women need to also actively participate that, but then again, feel that culture. So we have around 10 to 12 minutes to go. I'd really love to open it up. I don't know if we have a traveling microphone. If not, the room is quite, I think, big enough for us to all hear each other. So is there any questions or any comments from the audience that you want to share? Over there? Can you project your voice? Is that possible? Or somebody?
Sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I'll take the mic. Hi everyone, my name is Misha Rao. I guess this is a very interesting and insightful panel. My question to you is, what is the role of mentors in your life? I've been very fortunate over the last 5 years. I have been paired up with a phenomenal woman who actually also used to work in FinTech on the impact side and helped me transition quite a lot. I've also been very fortunate. I've had really fantastic male role models also at work. And I like some of the points that you made. You can't bundle women together. You can't do that. So if you can share with us some anecdotes of who are some of the folks who have really helped define and help you land where you are. Thank you.
Who wants to take that first?
I'll take it. I think, you know, you go through different stages of your life, and you know, you have different mentors. You know, I look up to my mom, who worked her whole life with 4 children and did that balance, and I couldn't have asked for a better upbringing. So I guess that set my paradigm that actually it's okay to work full-time as long as you're remembering what's important. And so I think, you know, in terms of helping you land, we've got to recognise, and it's a very personal thing, you've got to decide what's important for you, what's most important, what are you willing to sacrifice, or you know, what are you willing to move on, and what are you not? And once you've set those values, then everything will flow better. For example, I wanted to breastfeed my babies, but I also am a control freak, and when I worked for a large corporate, I didn't want to actually be away from work. And so, but you know, those are my kind of pillars. And I remember my boss at the time going, well, you just can't do both. And I'm like, well, I can. And I did, and my husband would bring the baby every 3 hours if I had to go somewhere, or I worked from home. And when they wanted me to travel, I'm like, well, I don't have to travel. You'll have to pay for my husband and the baby. So I didn't move on that, and everybody's very different. So I think find yourself a mentor that you can learn from, but also only you know what's important to you, and we're all so different. My sister-in-law has never worked and has children, but she's a full-time mother, and that's what she wants to do. So you have to decide what you are happy to move on and what you're not, and remember, never forget your why. As a working woman, that's really challenging. And I think for the men in the room, you know, if you have mothers that work for you, you know they're damn passionate about their job because they're choosing to come to work instead of being home with their children. And so that's where you hire really good people. And you have to make sure you make the right decisions. You don't always get that right. I remember I was at lunch with a client and my husband sent a photo of my son winning the cross country. And, you know, I missed him winning with this look of elation on his face because I had this lunch and it was the backup rainy day, and I made the decision next year I'm not going to miss him. And that night I remember bursting into tears going, I don't always make the right decisions, and I'm not going to miss it. And the next year I raced across town, broke the speed limit, ran in my heels across the field and go, darling, you got to win, mummy's here. And my husband was like, Jesus, no pressure. But he did. But he did. And, you know, so it's actually deciding what are you, and your mentor can guide you and you can learn from them, but you personally have to decide what are you willing to move on and what are you not.
I just wanted to add on, yeah, that was good. For mentors, it's really important to have a personal relationship. Having a very good relationship with a mentor, whether it's a man or a woman, is really important. And then there's another level of person, sponsor. Within the large organizations that I worked in, having a really strong sponsor, could be a man or a woman, who's going to elevate you and help you rise. So mentorship being on one level, but also sponsorship being on another level, where they're willing to bring you into meetings where you might be more junior, elevate your brand, bring you up, introduce you to people, really help to elevate you, I think is a really important part of having a mentor, having a sponsor, and being able to learn actually from people. There's some things that are good and some things that are bad. You want to keep the good and throw away the bad. Of course, I've had those situations with my kids too. I'm trying to think of course, all different situations with my kids. You know, I would say this, that, you know, being a mother, my kids are 24 and 22 now. They're in the workforce. My younger son works in financial services now. Woo! I must have maybe one thing right. He's next gen, and I'm proud of him. He decided not to work for a Fintech, works for an incumbent bank. I thought, well, and then he told me it's a better brand, Mom. I'm not going to mention his brand because he'll be upset with that. But I think this one thing that I would say to people, and particularly mothers, that I found in, you know, mothering my children, that every day you can't say in the work-life balance, you know, everything's equal, because it's some days and sometimes work comes first. Some days and work times your children come first. And so it's being able to really have enough confidence to know that it's time to put away work, go to your children. Time for your children and put away work, you know, both of the opposite. But you did remind me of one. I think this is a funny story. When I first started my business, I was doing a webinar, and I said to my kids, okay, I was working from home. I said, I'm going to be doing a webinar. And I put about 300 sticky notes on the office door. Do not open this door. Webinar. Do not open. Stop. I made a stop sign. Now, both of my kids, I'm not going to tell you how old they were, but believe me, they could read by then. And they burst open the door. Mom, I want to ask you a question in the middle of my webinar. So it's a great learning experience for, I think, kids to also learn what it means to be an entrepreneur and to see those things also.
I think just to share two, three things that are very concrete. I think, you know, really what I will encourage you getting out of this room is go and find Laurent to say you want to speak at this event next year. Give him your card and do it. I mean, obviously it's going to change the type of the event, but you should do it. And that's the way, you know, when you are talking about seats, you know, you may know that, but last year there was 10% women speaker. And actually, a group of us went a bit EV on Twitter, which I think Laura noticed. And part of, I think, the movement and the reason 23% of the spots are held by women speakers this year is also because of this voice. So please put yourself forward, be very concrete, in a very concrete action. The second thing is don't get out of this forum without having asked someone to be your mentor. You will laugh, but I found one of my mentors in the middle of Buckingham Palace. We'll never shout like, around a cup of tea. I would just say, do you want to be my mentor? He was a very senior person at the time being, and I said yes. So, don't get out of here without having one, and you will be surprised about the answer you will get. And the third one is when you have a sponsor, you need to be very direct about what you want to get out of it. A sponsor don't have a lot of time, so you've been very direct and very precise. I want a promotion, I want a raise, I want this job. It cannot be a conversation. And it needs to be a trade-off about part of your expertise you will bring in the business and part of what he can bring you. And if you make this relationship successful, at the beginning, your sponsor will remain for a long time.
Denise,
a little back to the question how we got here as well. So I come from family of entrepreneurs, so my grandma, my mom, my dad. So I've been raised and I've seen that everyone can do work. But my biggest support is my husband. So whoever you live with, you have to have the support from home to pursue your career, to actually put in the hours. I have my co-founder is a female as well. And when we met the first time, it's over 10 years ago, I was an employee for her, and she became my mentor and my supporter. And about taking the more junior people into the meetings, that was how it got started for me. And that is also what we all can do. Mm-hmm. And it can be both female and male. Yes. So, but really, give space for the more junior people, and when you find a people or see someone that actually is supporting younger or newer to the company, make sure you have contact to that one and make sure that they will be your sponsor as well within your workplace.
We have something called reverse mentorship. I don't know if anybody has had that in financial services, where you have a more senior person paired up with a more junior person, and they've been able to help with innovation. Each generation, right, can help the other one. The baby boomer may not be thinking of things the millennials are thinking about, and it helps elevate the millennials and helps the boomer to think more along the line of the millennial. So that's a concept that you might want to look up, reverse mentorship.
Yeah, that does actually work. It's quite impactful, and it's great to actually, when you start putting that on a social platform, to kind of see it as a social experiment. So we're actually up on time. I think we've discussed some really practical ways that I think each and every one of us can take that back into our organizations and our everyday lives. To Denise's point, that should not be restricted to any gender. And we all have, I think, the accountability to help drive this forward in terms of the agenda. I'd like to thank these wonderful panelists and also encourage all of you to connect with each other and discuss a little bit more this topic and what we can do in the year of 2020 in order to help move that forward. Thank you very much. A big round of applause for you.
Thank you.